Back to another edition of Tell Ted, a show where I find people who I find interesting and people that I think have a connection to Wadsworth or do have a connection to Wadsworth, and I invite them to come in and tell Ted. Today I'm coming to you from the world headquarters, by the way, for Tell Ted, which is WCTV Studios in Wadsworth, Ohio. Today, I have found somebody who I have always found interesting all my adult life, from 7 years old on. He has chosen to be a musician all of his life. He spent some time here in Wadsworth that we'll get into. Before we introduce him on camera, I'd like to have you hear a little bit of his work. Recently, he did a CD with a band that he's played with before. They asked him if he would do a song. He said he would. So I'd like you all to hear that song. It is his version of a song that I have always liked called Only the Lonely by the late, great Roy Orbison. And by the way, the song you're about to hear, my guest is the lead singer, plays the drums, and also did his own backup vocals on it. Let's roll the song.
Down, 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 oh yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, 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 oh. Only the lonely, only the lonely, only the lonely. Down, 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 know the way I feel tonight. There goes my heart, they're gone forever, so far apart, but only the lonely know why I cry, only the lonely. A new romance, no more sorrow, but that's the chance you gotta take. If you're lonely, your heart breaks, only the lonely. A new romance, no more sorrow, but that's the chance you gotta take. If you're lonely, your heart breaks, only the lonely.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was sung to you by Mr. William Severance, otherwise known to me as Bill Severance, my brother, coming to us from Acton, California, sunny Acton, California. Bill, welcome into Tell Ted.
Thank you. Actually, I'm in Oakview, California today, but it's not a big distinction between Acton and Oakview for you.
I knew you would find a way to trip me up. Thank you very much. Not surprising, but what is surprising is the amount of time, the amount of years that you have spent in the music business. Started shortly after you left Wadsworth, and the fact that you've done it all your life is the rarity of it. Most musicians, as you know, most people know, they do it as a part-time thing, with the exception of the people who hit it big and make it for years and years, and those are rare, as we all know. I need to ask you, when did you pick up a drum? Of all the instruments in the world that someone could learn to play, what got you into drums, and about how old were you?
I was 8 years old. It was in Lakewood, Ohio, 1960. Our parents had recently gotten divorced. Nobody had any money. In class, in my third grade class, a list of musical instruments was passed around. That all the instruments on that list, the school system made available to us class lessons on each of those instruments. Any one that we wanted to study, it was either 50 cents or $1 a lesson. And I got a hold of that list, and I said, clarinet, no, flute, no, violin, no, piano, no. And I went, no, all the way down the list until the only things I did not say no to were trumpet, trombone, and drums. Like I say, the divorce happened. Nobody had any money. Nobody in the family had instruments lying around. Our grandmother was talking to a friend of hers, a lady named Marie, who, hearing the story, said, well, you know what, my son made himself a practice pad, and he's got some drumsticks laying around. He hasn't touched those things in years. You want them? And my grandmother said yes. So she brought that practice pad and a pair of mismatched drumsticks home. And I started taking class lessons with that. And I played that. I tacked a piece of floor linoleum to the pad. It didn't have any rubber or anything bouncy on it. It was just wood. And I tacked some kitchen floor linoleum to it. And that's what I started to play for drum lessons. And that got me into the school band and orchestra at McKinley Elementary School in Lakewood, Ohio.
And you started this at 8 years old?
I was 8 in 1960 in the third grade, yes.
At 8 years old, I had just graduated from pots and pans and learned how to ride a two-wheeler without training wheels. That's what I find amazing.
You rode a two-wheeler without training wheels when you were 4 or 5.
That's entirely possible. I loved
that's definite.
My bicycle was freedom, as was my car when I turned 16. But you figured this out at 8 years old. You got the practice pad. We have a picture of a practice pad for those that, now yours, this is one I pulled off of Google. It's a modern day practice pad. Yours was homemade, if I remember, wasn't it?
Correct. Yeah. Marie said her son made it. He took 2 pieces of wood, put them together in a V shape, and nailed or glued them together, and tapped around on it for a while, and then just left it for years until Marie had that conversation with Grandma, and that was given to me.
That's crazy. And I remember you playing that incessantly. You were, whatever beyond driven is, you practiced all the rest of the time when we lived together. I can remember you were always practicing. And even after you graduated to drums, which we'll get into, which made it harder because drums were a lot louder than the practice pad. One of the themes that you're going to see throughout this interview, and I'm just giving the audience a heads up, a lot of the success that you have had, and other musicians that I've talked to, a lot of other musicians that I've read about, got their breaks by being prepared, understanding their instrument well, knowing how to play it, how to play with the people that were going to hire you. And then it was word of mouth. And you and I have talked about this. They call it networking today, or network building. They teach college classes in it. When you and I were coming up, I ended up in sales, you ended up in the music business. You learned instinctively that you had to go out and learn how to meet people, look them in the eye, speak their language, shake their hand properly, and get through life. And you did it. I did it as a matter of course for sales. You learned to do it early, and it really, and when I say it made your breaks, it didn't give you the hit single. It got you on the team. You didn't have a chance to play for anybody until you got on the team. And that is the big break. Then you can pick up your ball and run with it. And you obviously did that. One of the things, so you're, you're in elementary school, you went into high school, by this time you're in Columbus, right?
Yep.
High school, your marching band?
Played marching band, orchestra,
Okay.
lab band, or stage band, it was also called. Sang in choir, just about anything you could do in a music organization in high school, I was in it.
And what came out of that, again, through a series of networking, some of it behind your back, evidently, you had a professional job before you graduated from high school.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
The Jimmy Dorsey band came through town.
Tell us who the Jimmy Dorsey band was in perspective for people.
Jimmy Dorsey was a popular band leader in the big band era. He and his brother Tommy rose to fame together. They couldn't get along very well. They were both great musicians, but they didn't get along. Apparently Tommy was a mean drunk, but that's another story. So they ended up leading their own bands, and they were popular. They had hit records. Jimmy Dorsey's big hit record at the time was a song called So Rare. Anyway, the band manager and the bass player at the time, when I was a senior in high school, was from Columbus, Ohio. Their drummer, a New York City guy, wanted to leave the band, so they're looking for drummers. The band was not, Jimmy Dorsey had been dead for 15 years by this time.
Right.
So it was not like they were having hit records anymore. So the band manager called around to different people, different drummers, prominent drummers in Columbus, Ohio. None of them wanted to do it. It wasn't enough money. And he said, well, you got students, anybody young that you know that might want to do this. And my band director and my drum instructor and a guy who was leading a stage band program in Columbus at that time named Dave Wheeler, they all put my name forward. And I got called. I was still a senior in high school. And my folks said, you got to graduate high school first. So that went back to the band. They said, okay, we can keep the drummer on. We'll stay for another couple of months. And the day after I graduated high school, I was on a plane to Chicago to be the new drummer for the Jimmy Dorsey band. And that was June of 1970.
That's pretty crazy to get a professional job before you graduate in the music business, and you're not playing with they're not, like you said, that they're not Elvis in the 60s or anything like that, but you were working, you were getting paid. What kind of venues did you guys play?
And it was cool because the Dorseys were the era of our parents. They knew who the Dorseys were. They were fans of the Dorseys when they were kids. So it was evidence that I was doing something important.
What kind of venues? You weren't playing bars. What were you? Where were you playing?
No, we were playing concerts by and large.
Okay.
You know, a hall would be rented, and it would be promoted, and tickets would be sold, and there would be booze sold at those events.
Mm-hmm.
And a number of people would come up, usually pretty inebriated, and demand to know, where the hell is Jimmy Dorsey? How dare you guys come out here and play as the Jimmy Dorsey band without Jimmy Dorsey?
They didn't realize he'd been dead for 15.
15 years, right?
Now I know you also went to college after high school. Tell me how you made that transition from the Dorsey Band and ended up, because you were a full-time student, correct? When you went?
Yes, yes. I did the summer after high school with the Jimmy Dorsey Band. Then I went to Boston and attended 1 year or 2 semesters, if you will, of Berklee College of Music, and I learned a lot. It was worth doing. I was an arranging composition major, but I played in different bands, different organizations within the school. Met a lot of people. Ran out of money for another year. Couldn't afford to do another year of that. But I met some guys and played in a rock band over the summer after a year at Berklee. And on breaks, the semester breaks at Berklee, I went back and played with the Dorsey Band a few times, Jimmy Dorsey Band. And at the end of that summer, I ended up going back to Ohio, where I was living in Wadsworth at that time, practicing every day, practicing like crazy, and trying to meet people wherever I could. Ended up going to Kent State University. And while I was there and answered an ad for roommates, I became a roommate of some guys who were Kent State people over in a suburb of Ravenna, Ohio, called Black Horse.
Yep. And
so this is a year after the riots at Kent State. That was May 4th, 1970. And a woman who was there, who was attending the university then, the riots, they shut the whole school down, sent everybody home.
Yep.
So this woman went back to where she's from in New Jersey, spent a year or so living with mom and dad, working at dad's company, Bostitch, the staple makers, and got pretty fed up with that. So she decided to go back to Ohio and look up some old friends. And that led her to my apartment, the apartment I was sharing with these 2 other guys. One of them was an old friend of hers, and she knocked on the door. I answered. I was the only one there. She was looking for Don Kevern. He wasn't in. I said, well, come on in. We'll talk. And we talked for 3 hours. And yeah, and that was Paula Rafferty.
We'll get to Paula. We'll come back to Paula.
Sure.
Let's go back and fill in some holes between high school, Berklee, and being back in Wadsworth. You've obviously upgraded your equipment. You're no longer playing on a drum pad. You got what I remember you being. I wanted a Stingray bicycle, a Schwinn Stingray bicycle. You wanted what I remember you called a trap set. Did you get your trap set? How old were you, and what kind was it?
I did get it. It was I wanted a Ludwig, like what Ringo and Charlie played, or Rogers, like what Dave Clark played. But what I got was a Kent set, and it was bought at Duran's Music in Lakewood. I was 12 or 13. Mom bought it for me. Like you said, you got the Stingray, and I got the drum set. And actually, you got a skateboard also and a guitar. And yeah, and you were the first kid I knew to ride a skateboard, and you took guitar lessons at Duran's Music for, I don't know, a couple of months, lost interest, and I started playing the guitar. So I'm playing guitar and drums. The Kent drum set took me up to Columbus. I was playing that in Columbus in 9th grade, and finally I borrowed money from my stepdad and bought myself a Ludwig drum set, a la what Ringo and Charlie were playing. Ringo and Charlie.
I presume you probably used it at a pawn shop or a museum.
I was prowling the pawn shops. I knew what used drums could be had for, really good quality used drums, and Mom wasn't hearing it. She was going to buy me a new drum set. It was not the Kent drum set was not the quality of a used Ludwig or Rogers, but that's what I got, and I played it, as you remember, incessantly.
Yep.
Uncle Harvey lent me an old Slingerland snare drum, so I had a good snare drum for a while. And then when he found out I was playing rock and roll, he came and took it back.
Isn't that funny?
Yep.
Isn't that funny? Because you were playing rock and roll with it.
Well, he was a generation older than Mom and Dad.
Right.
And he played in pit orchestras in theaters where there used to be a live band playing for movies before sound pictures. That was his background.
Yeah,
God, a great snare drum of his was not going to be used to play that awful rock and roll. He didn't say those words to me, but that was the attitude when he came and took the drum back.
I find that funny. So you're playing that. Did you have to haul your equipment around when you were with the Dorsey band?
Yes.
That's a lot of hauling for a drummer. And
You know what?
By bus?
I was traveling by bus. It was an old Trailways bus that the windows had been sealed shut so that the air conditioning would stay in, but the air conditioning was broken down for most of that summer. Pretty uncomfortable, but I was the youngest guy in the band. I was 18. I was bulletproof. I was also the lowest paid guy in the band. The new guy, the youngest guy, the lowest paid. All right, anyway, and I didn't even have a full set of cases. I had a trap case, and that was it. Wow. And all the other drums, I think my cymbals, I just wrapped them up in an old blanket.
And I remember Dick Blatter and I, in my senior year, I believe, we took off and came up to visit you in Boston while you were going to Berkeley. And I don't remember you having drums set up in your apartment. Did you have them hidden somewhere?
No, I had a practice pad set in the apartment. The actual drum set was in a locker at the school. We all had drum lockers, special lockers for our drum sets.
So you would, when you went into a class, if you needed your drums, you had to get them out of the locker, set them up, take your class, tear them down, put them back in the locker.
Correct.
There's a lot of work to being a drummer over a guitar player or most of the other instruments in a band.
Yeah, there might be something wrong with us.
I don't have time for that. This is only a 1 hour show. So you get back to Wadsworth. Let's the time you spent in Wadsworth, and I know you always practiced, and you played with some folks in Wadsworth. Jamming, did you have any band work that you were doing for money?
No, not in Wadsworth, but I met and played some rehearsals and some jam sessions with Jesse Smith and Jerry Wolf. Yeah. And Jerry had a band at the time with his brother John. And I remember you and I going over to Akron, some nightclub in Akron, to hear those guys. And I remember being very impressed with them. Jerry was quite a good singer, quite a good guitar player. John was a very good drummer. And I remember being impressed because in Columbus, I was trying to get some bands I was playing in to play songs by the Beatles and the Who. And they just weren't having it. I don't know why. But I heard Jerry and John and that band play Beatles and Who songs and really do them well. Damn, these guys are good. They had never actually got to playing gigs in and around Wadsworth.
They had an organ player too that had what was the organ where they sat on the speaker with the spinning. What was that?
The spinning speaker was a Leslie cabinet. Huh? And I don't remember the name of that. I don't remember the name of that organ player, but he was probably playing either a Farfisa or a Vox organ or a Hammond organ.
And I'm sure someone will correct me. It seems to me the name of the band was the Titians, but I'm sure if that's wrong, somebody in Wadsworth in the next day or two will correct me. John, Jerry, there was a I can't think of the other rhythm guitar player. Jesse Smith, who you also got to know, who was in Wadsworth. A lot of people know Jesse. Didn't play with that band, but he was friends with all those guys. I think Jesse was probably playing with his dad's country band by then. So he would have been otherwise busy. And you also saw Hank Smith.
I saw Hank Smith play lead for a band in Kent, Ohio called 156075. Yeah, what a name. And they later just got called the Numbers Band.
Right.
But it was a blues band. They were into rootsy blues music. And Hank Smith was absolutely tearing it up as the lead player for that band.
That was pretty heady times. And I don't know, I've lost track of Hank. I don't know where he went, where he ended up. But be interesting guy to talk to. I have recently talked to Jesse and hope to do an interview with him sometime in the near future. So you get out of
playing lead for his dad's country band when he was 11 years old.
That's what he told me. That's why I want to talk to him.
Jesse Smith is quite an amazing collection of talents in one person.
He is. And before we leave him, a lot of people may or may not know, he's also become quite a luthier, a guitar
Yep.
builder. And I've been to his shop. It's amazing what he can do with wood and guitar strings.
I bought and am playing one of his creations.
I was leading up to that. You did. You own a Jesse Smith, and
Yep.
in my opinion, it's the best sounding guitar you own, and it's the best sounding guitar you've ever owned. I just
Right.
love the sound of that. I can pick it out of a crowd. So you get out of Wadsworth, you're at Kent, and you meet this girl named Paula, and you bore her to tears with a 3-hour conversation the day you meet her. That's amazing. Did you stay in touch with Paula?
Oh yeah. She was on her way to a church meeting. It wasn't a church, it was a religious group, a real fundamentalist Christian group. And she was hitchhiking. And I said, oh, no. I got to give you a ride. Please let me give you a ride. Even then I thought hitchhiking, especially for women, single women, was dangerous.
Idea.
And I gave her a ride, and I later attended some of those meetings with her. And it was a small group. It was fewer than 10 people in the group. And the charismatic leader of that group hated me.
Nice.
And after me showing up for a couple of meetings, they didn't like how I looked. They didn't how I acted, how I talked. And they told her, you lose him or we lose you. And she quit the group immediately and moved in with me.
And how long were you guys together? Then you got married? Because
we got married
Black Horse?
We were living in Black Horse. Yep, on the west side of Ravenna, living in sharing that apartment with the other two guys. We lived together for 3 years before we got married. We've been married for 2 years when we started our family.
You can't tell the story of Bill Severance without including Paula from that auspicious meeting in Black Horse to the day that she passed away. She was an everlasting, ever-present, ever-supportive part of your life. And
that's true.
Of your 3 children.
That's exactly right.
And that all very important to the whole story that is Bill Severance. So at some point, and I don't want to rush this, but you end up going to California. Basically, as I remember, you were doing as much work as you could do in this area, in Northeast Ohio. You started playing jingles at a studio in Cleveland, correct?
I started playing a number of different types of recording sessions in Cleveland. Yes.
Okay. And how did the jingle thing come up? I mean, again, this you're bouncing around as a drummer. You've been to Boston, you've been to Jersey, and now you're back in Ohio. How do they pluck you out to be doing jingle work in Cleveland at a studio?
I was playing in the Kent State Lab Band for the year that I attended Kent State. I was the new guy in the group of musicians who played in that band. So the older guys who played drums always got to play the better rehearsals and the better performances. So it was finally my turn to play because I'd been playing longer than any of them, even though I was younger. I'd been playing since I was 8. Started with a drum set when I was 12. I could play rings around all of them, and anybody could hear it. So I'm playing a rehearsal one day with the lab band. Long-haired, stoned-out, hippie-looking guy is sitting at the side of the room listening to the rehearsal. And at the end of the rehearsal, he walks up to me and he's clearly blasted out of his gourd. And he looks at me and says, "Wow, a freak who can read music, play swing, and play rock and roll. I got to get you on some recording sessions." And I said, "Right, sure." I gave him my name and number. I figured I'll never hear from him again. A couple of weeks later, he called me up and he was stone cold sober. And he was Joe Hudson, who was a staff songwriter for Joe Bett Music Publishing Company. Joe Bett was the music publishing company for Motown Records. He was a Motown writer.
So this is a guy who's connected to Motown, who's headquartered in Cleveland.
Yep. Well, they're writers for publishing companies all over the world.
Okay.
But yeah, Motown is at the time was actually they had just moved to Los Angeles by that time. but it was Motown. And Joe and a friend of his named Carol Frankel, she was also a staff songwriter for Joe Bet, and they would hire me to come in and play. They had to turn in songs, demos of their songs that they'd written periodically, every 6 months or 2 months or whatever. Anyway, so they hired me to come and play drums on their song demos. And then I met other musicians who were involved in the recording scene in Cleveland, who were on those, and they recommended me to other people. And one of those recommendations, a guitar player friend of mine, Bob Fraser, who was on a lot of those recording sessions,
who I have met,
recommended me to a man named Al Balo, who was writing music for commercials. I played on a bunch of those, and I started playing for other composers in Cleveland who were writing music for commercials. And there were other really good drummers in Cleveland at that time who read very well and played very well. But each one had a different peccadillo, if you will, that it kind of got them kicked out of the way. And well, let's get the new kid. Let's have him come in. He can read, he can play. Bob Fraser thinks he's good. Tom Baker thinks he's good. You know, guys who were already established in the scene as guitar player and bass player. And that opened those doors up. And I dug work, and I dragged my drums into whatever studio in Cleveland. And I loved the work because I never knew what we were going to play till I got my drums set up and the music hit the stand for us to look at it and read it. I like that.
let me see if I understand this. So doing studio work, you might be called in. Let's help the audience also. There's a group out in California called the Rat Pack. No,
Wrecking Crew.
Wrecking Crew. The Wrecking Crew were studio musicians that big artists, even if they had their own band, sometimes producers, sometimes handlers would say, I want the best of the best in the studio with you to record this song. We don't have time to name all of the songs by artists we all know, where the Wrecking Crew were the backup musicians because they were considered the hot shots. So you're part of this studio group in the Cleveland area who gets called in to do, you might be a commercial, it might be a jingle, it might be a potential song that Motown wants to hear more of, right?
Or a record. I played on Maureen McGovern's first album in Cleveland.
That is the most amazing thing. Before you left for California, you record a song for a girl who's out of Youngstown area?
Warren, Ohio.
Warren, Ohio.
Or Boardman, either Warren or Boardman, yeah.
Who does Morning After. There's got to be a Morning After. Everybody knows the song. Did a little research on that. That song was #1 on the Billboard charts in 1973. And I don't know if you know this, but that song also won an Academy Award in 1973 for original song. I did know that.
I didn't remember that, yeah.
So you're recording at the studio. You're playing 2 shows a week, if I remember, or 2 shows a day every Sunday at the Cathedral of Tomorrow.
We didn't call them shows, we called them services.
That thank you for that correction. But bottom line is you're doing everything you can, and you're just not making a lot of money on a regular basis. So
I was playing 5 nights a week with Pat Pace then also.
I forgot about Pat Pace. A lot of the jazz fans around this area will remember Pat Pace.
Yeah.
Is interesting. Again, your connections got you into the door there. Pat Pace's son is a drummer, correct?
Yep. Very good one too.
It's just the connections, the things that helped open doors for you that you had a big hand in. And you made another point that I hear from a lot of musicians who are successful. Again, being prepared, being available, and showing up, being reliable. You show up, you're not foggy-headed, you're ready to play at the downbeat. And it's amazing how important that little fact is.
And you're agreeable. You know, yes, there's notes written on the page, but if they want to change something, no problem. If they want to make up something, no problem. Just show yourself to be agreeable and flexible. with whoever the producer is or the arranger is, what they want to do, and that gets you more work.
Well, that was a great stroke of luck, genius, whatever it was, to get hit with the studio work doing Maureen McGovern's great song. You did 2 albums with her, didn't you, or just one?
We did. I played on the first album, and we had started on a second album. We got about halfway through that, and the plug got pulled. The producer took the whole project to LA to finish it.
Okay.
He never understood why, but it was actually a symptom that I was seeing happen throughout all of the work I was doing in the studios in Cleveland, where the better paying work was going to either New York or Nashville or Los Angeles, work that we used to do in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
But it became, for whatever reason, more famous players, more wrecking crew kind of players that they would get. I mean, we were doing a great job, but to have the prestige of having famous studio musicians in New York and LA and Nashville play on their project seemed to be worth taking the project to those towns. And it was a trend I was seeing. And seeing that, I said, I love doing that work. I don't want to see it go away. I want to go where they do that all the time. That's what led to the decision to go to LA.
It had to be shortly after 73, wasn't it? What year did you all head out there?
We landed in LA just before Thanksgiving, 1977.
And you didn't land, you pulled in a car. You packed up your wife.
Pickup truck, pulling a U-Haul.
You had your oldest daughter by then, Piper.
She was 6 months old.
And packed up that in your thousands and thousands of dollars and went to Los Angeles to become a star. How'd that go?
I wasn't looking to be a star. I just wanted to be involved in that work. I mean, I didn't care if anybody knew who I was. I just wanted to be involved in the work, the music work.
It's a good thing you didn't want anybody to know, because when you hit LA, you didn't know anybody, did you?
Correct. There was one musician that I knew from Ohio, but he and I had not worked together in Ohio, but we knew who each other were and we knew of each other's work. I looked him up and he was able to hire me for some gigs that he did. That was Rusty Higgins. And from there, it was me on the phone every day, calling people, trying to meet people, going to jam sessions and sitting in with bands. And
you joined the union?
I joined 2 unions there. I joined the LA, Local 47 and Local 7 in Orange County.
And I'm sure got some work at some point from the Union Hall.
I inside of a month of me joining Local 7, I got a gig with the Ronnie Brown Trio. We kind of a Peter Nero style jazz piano trio, and we did a Columbia Artist Concert tour for 6 weeks, I think. We drove all over the country playing these Columbia Artist concerts.
And you, so from 77 to 2024, you have been based in Los Angeles area.
Yes.
And you've played with Eric Carmen for a while?
Nope, never played with him.
Who'd you go to? Who?
I played for a bunch of different people, but Hudson Brothers, Jim Messina, Jim Messina after Loggins and Messina.
I thought you went on a tour to Europe or someplace, or
never been to Europe. I went to Japan. I went to Japan
and Australia.
And I played Australia and New Zealand with the Captain and Tennille.
Okay. Who'd you go to Japan with?
Jim Messina.
Jim Messina. That's right. That's why I was getting confused. So in playing with Captain and Tennille, and they had a drummer at the time, right?
Yep.
How do you replace that guy with Bill Severance? How does that happen?
I don't know exactly how it broke down, but Captain and Tennille wanted to do some newer music, and the guy who was playing before me, a very good drummer, by the way, wasn't fitting the bill musically the way they wanted. So they put out some feelers that they were looking for a drummer, and a percussionist friend of mine who used to play for Captain and Tennille told me, here, call this guy. And he gave me the manager's name and phone number, and he said, and here's the name you used to say who recommended you. You can't use my name. This percussionist used to play for Captain Encino. That's how he had all this information, but he'd already been fired by them, and I don't even know why of that. But I did what he said. I called the manager, told him who I am, what I do, blah, blah, blah. He gave my number to Daryl Dragon, the captain, called me up, arranged a meeting. I brought in my demo tape. I met him at his studio. He listened to it, and I thought he was going to have me play something. No, he heard the demo tape, and he said, "Okay, you got the gig if you want it." I said, "Thanks, love to."
So they don't have a TV show yet. They're a
No,
band for hire. And what kind of venues did you guys play?
we were playing concerts mostly at casinos.
Okay, so you're in Vegas a lot.
Vegas, Tahoe, and Reno initially.
Okay, but that's good.
Other than we played concerts in other places around the country.
That's pretty good work compared to the corner bar.
It's great.
Yeah,
It's great.
Yeah. And then they ended up with a TV show. Now, was this after Messina? Jim
No,
Messina
I played for Jim. I played for Jim. Yeah. Jim was working with Kenny Loggins, doing Loggins and Messina at that time. And I had been in the Captain Encino band for less than a year, I think. And the Tony Tennille show, there was a Captain Encino TV show before I joined the band, and it was a summer replacement series show.
Yep.
And on the strength of that, I guess they decided to put together a talk show format for Tony, and that was called the Tony Tennille Show. And I played drums for the house band for that show.
And they had a lot of musical guests. Who did you get to play with or back for the TV show? Do a little
Chuck
name
Berry.
dropping.
Chuck Berry, B.B. King, Mel Tillis, Jerry Lee Lewis, Dusty Springfield. Who else? There was a special musical guest for every show. Tony would do a featured number by herself, and there would be a number or two featuring the musical guest on that show. It was fabulous. It was fun. It only ran for 6 months, but wow, what a great experience.
That had to be pretty heady times for a scrawny little drummer from Wadsworth, Ohio.
Well, I wasn't scrawny, but I was skinnier than I am now, yes.
So then you played with Jim Messina after Loggins and Messina broke up.
Yeah.
And Jim Messina came from a band called Poco, right?
Jim was in Buffalo Springfield after their bass player got thrown out of the country, sent back to Canada. Jim came in and played bass for that, and then that led to he and Richie Fiore, one of the Buffalo Springfield guys, forming a band called Poco. And Jim played that for a couple of albums. And then he hooked up with Kenny Loggins, and they had the great success as Loggins and Messina. And that went for about 5 years. And they split up. Don't know why, but it was acrimonious, I heard. I don't know any details. But Jim went on his own, Kenny went on his own. And friends who knew me knew that Jim was going to be changing drummers. The drummer wanted a great drummer before me, wanted to leave. So that's when I got the call. And I played for Jim for almost 3 years.
It is, again, more networking. Every story you've told starts with somebody who knew you, knew of an opening coming up. Somebody put your name in the hat, or you were given the opportunity to put your own name in. And it's almost classic networking on your part before anybody knew what in the world networking was. We didn't call it that back then. It was out getting business, doing business. Did you get any studio work when you moved to California?
Yeah. Well, I got involved in different things.
Because that's you kind of wanted to go out there to follow that work, and so you.
It was the work I wanted to do, and I got to play on some recording sessions, some albums by people that you probably never heard of. I did play. I played drums on one of the Captain and Tennille albums, but I didn't play on the hit from that album. The hit from that album was "Do That to Me One More Time."
Yep.
And one of the Wrecking Crew drummers played on that. I played on other cuts from that album that weren't hits.
I read a book called Deconstructing Sammy Davis Jr., where I forget the author's name. They started with the death of Sammy Davis Jr. and went back reviewing his career and what he did and didn't do and how he did it and how he should have done it. And one of the things that the book laments is that he was a hired gun all of his life, which meant he didn't own rights. He didn't own property to any of the music he ever did, which I'm not saying that's good or bad. And I don't think the author was either. It's just the way it was. But I think you have to work harder. I think you have to know more. I think you have to be more available if you're going to make a living, and you have as basically a hired gun.
Yeah, I've made my living accompanying other people for the most part.
You not really a songwriter, although you did some interesting arranging, if that's what you call it. Maybe you'll have to help me. When you shortly after you got out to California, you were approached by the adult film industry. How in the world does that happen, Bill?
A musician friend of mine was a friend of his from high school. A lady named, I should probably not name names. She was writing scripts for X-rated film, and he told me about it. And I said, and I mean, they were friends, platonic friends from high school, and I said, "Wow, get us a meeting, see if we can write some music." And he wasn't interested in doing that, but he arranged the meeting.
Were you joking?
Huh?
Were you joking?
No.
So he didn't.
So yeah, he set up a meeting. I met this lady, and she introduced me to some directors that she was working with, people who would hire her to write scripts. You have to have a script to have a story, some kind of story to piece these X-rated films together. And it was music by the pound, and there wasn't much money in any of them. And it's not my best music at all, but it was a break. I was trying to. My goal was to write music for legitimate film and TV.
Of course.
And I knew that there are some other famous composers who had actually gotten their start in X-rated film and were able to break through to legitimate film and TV. That did not happen for me.
And you did not use your name. You didn't do those under Bill Severance, if I remember right.
Correct. I called myself Electrical Shorts.
There you go, which would be a perfect name for writing music for the X-rated film industry. And so they would send you, what were you dealing with, cassette tapes back then?
Yeah.
They would send you a cassette tape of the action and the dialogue?
Yep.
And your job, with no other information than that, was to put music to it.
I would write music, and then I would record it at my house, a little studio that I had, and I would take my music to their production facility, and we would lay the music into the film.
That is just, I remember when I heard the story, that kind of thing probably would have never crossed your plate had you stayed in Northeast Ohio, but.
That's right.
Be that as it may. I remember coming out to California. I believe I was out there on for a sales meeting and went to a little bar near the Sunset Strip. You'll correct me.
That strip just a couple of doors down from the Whiskey A Go-Go.
Correct. A little joint called Sneaky Pete's.
Right.
Which wasn't really a little joint. It was a pretty good size lounge. I don't remember if they served food. I wasn't there to eat. You were
Yes,
playing.
they did. Yes, they did.
I'm sure they looked like it. It was a nice size, what you used to call a club. It wasn't your corner bar. It was a club. And you were playing in a trio. I think it was a jazz trio, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes.
And
led by a Scottish piano player singer named Ray Cousins.
Okay. And as I recall, I was there with Paula, your wife, and a guy walked in who I thought I recognized. He went and sat in a booth. We were sitting up at the bar. You guys, if I remember right, were playing on a stage right behind the bar.
We were not behind the bar. There was there was sort of a bar built around the piano.
Okay, that's right, around the piano. So this guy walks in, he goes, sits in a booth, and I can't help myself. I keep peeking over my shoulder, peeking. Finally, I told Paul, I said, I got to go over and see if that's who I think it is. And she said, okay. And I walked over and I said, are you who I think you are? This guy looks up at me with his driest humor you can imagine. He said, that just depends on who you think I am. And I said, well, I think you're Johnny Carson. And he said, I am. And he shook my hand, and I gave him a business card of mine to autograph the back of it. And I guess that's as close as I ever was to starstruck, because I watched Johnny Carson from as early as I can remember and enjoyed it. And evidently he enjoyed you guys' trio, because you said that wasn't the first time he was there.
Right. There were a number of different celebrity people who would drift in and out of Sneaky Pete's over the year or two that I played there.
Yeah, that was nice. More recently, you played with bands. COVID had a terrible effect on the entire music industry. I'm going to say it had a negative effect on the industry everywhere in this country.
That's correct.
Perhaps around the world. But it was devastating to the music industry. It was even worse to the live music industry. Has it recovered at all out there, Bill?
There's been some recovery, but full recovery, not even close.
Yeah.
It's a different world because of the pandemic.
Yep.
We are all in, and it isn't just music, but because that's what I'm involved in. We musicians are trying to figure out what our new normal is going to be in this post-pandemic environment.
You and I have talked about this on the phone in the last couple of years since the pandemic. I think we are privy to more live music. We're very fortunate in this part of Northeast Ohio. All spring, all summer, into the fall, we have live bands playing outside venues, inside venues, but we are blessed with an awful lot of live music. And I think to some degree more than maybe you guys are out there. They're not getting a lot of money. I don't think any of these bands are getting rich, but they're playing.
Yeah, well, the pandemic is, well, like I say, it has changed everything. I mean, there was a better part of 3 years we weren't playing anywhere. Yeah. All the venues that we used to play in, even our church. I'm the band leader at church, and our church was shut down for a year and a half or 2 years. Didn't even have services. No music, nothing.
Yeah, and then all of that goes to another part of the thing that has opened doors for you that you mentioned. I didn't think of this. Along with the networking, along with the being prepared, you added the desire. I can honestly say for as long as I've known you, which has been a minute, you just wanted to play music.
Play it and sing it and write it. Yep.
Yeah, it's just not an obsession. It's just been, you've been one of the fortunate people. I count myself as being fortunate because I got to do what I love to do in sales. You got to play music for a living, and you did it. And look at you, you're almost 70. Oh wait, you're almost 73.
72, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's been a remarkable run. Now, I know you played something last night, something called the Old Fiddlers. Tell me briefly about that.
Old Time Fiddlers is the name of the organization. You pay $20 a year to be a member, and there are different fiddler locations throughout the state of California, and they have they put up twice a month performances. And as a member, you show up to one of the performance venues, and you get on a list, and that gets you 2 or 3 songs of your choosing in the PAs, through the PA system in front of an audience. And the goal is to originally it was to further the development and propagation of fiddle playing, of traditional American country and fiddle music. But it's mostly guitar players and singers who show up to that. There's a few fiddle players, but yeah, I joined that organization again to meet people.
Sure.
I showed up to a fiddler's event. It's near where my girlfriend lives. My wife passed away some years ago, so I have a girlfriend now, and she lives in Oakview, California. And the fiddlers meeting in Southern California is in Oakview. So I drove over there and listened and heard and said, okay, well, I'll be part of this. I don't play drums in it at all. I play guitar and sing.
And what you played last night? What'd you play?
Yesterday afternoon, I sang 3 songs. I sang Sea of Heartbreak. I sang I Can't Help It If I'm Still in Love with You. And I sang Traveling Man.
An old Ricky Nelson song.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Bill, it's been an incredible run for you. You've had some great highs. You've had your share of desert, but again, to get to do something that you've always wanted to do, make a living at it, and you agreed to do it through thick and thin, just like Paula agreed to staying with you all through that, and God love her, she did. You've got Piper, Megan, and Wyatt, your 2 daughters and son, and they're all doing well in California, I presume. Did any of them pick up an instrument and play?
You know, they all had an opportunity. They were given an opportunity. I wasn't forcing it on them, but they all had an opportunity to play a musical instrument as they were growing up. And they all did a little bit for a little while, but it didn't really take with any of them. And that's fine with me. They are very interested in music. They are very particular about the music they want to hear. And it's okay with me if they don't want to go out and perform as singers or players.
So if nothing else, they got a good ear for what they like.
Oh yeah, they heard a big variety of music growing up.
Sounds a lot like their father to me. Brother, I love you. It's good to talk to you like this. I'm glad you get to we'll get to save some of this for posterity in case anybody ever says, gosh, I wonder what Bill Severance ever did. If they go to Wadsworth Cable TV, they'll be able to see. I'm happy you came in to share some time with me at Tell Ted, and I've got some guests coming up that maybe we'll be talking more about you.
Well, nothing I have to live down, I hope. It was a pleasure. I was surprised you wanted to expose what I've been doing to a Wadsworth-centric audience.
Well, I figured
if to be included. Thank you.
If I didn't do it, who would?
That's right. You're right.
All right, brother. Until I see you again, take care and thank you again.
I love you. Thanks for including me.
All right. See you. Bye.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.